What would you do if you found out that there were other human-like species living in the same area as our prehistoric ancestors? Would you be surprised? Maybe you'd think that our ancestors would have easily defeated them. But what if they weren't more evolved? What if they were actually less evolved than we are? This is life a million years ago. And today, we'll find out why the first prehistoric humans had to flee from a less evolved species. So stick around to the end to find out who it was. According to some reports, the oldest fossils of Homo sapiens date back 300,000 years, but others say they could be much older. In any case, scientists are still trying to determine exactly when and where the first humans appeared. One thing is certain, though, they did not appear alone. There were already other human species inhabiting the Earth at the time. The most famous of these species is, of course, Neanderthals. They lived in Europe and Western Asia until about 40,000 years ago. But they weren't the only ones. We also had the Denisovans. Unlike Neanderthals, Denisovans inhabited the eastern part of Asia, more specifically the territory of modern-day China. Genetic studies suggest that they interbred with both Neanderthals and humans, but their fossils are much rarer. There's another, much older species whose appearance dates back 4 million years. That's right, I'm talking about Australopithecus afarensis. You may have heard of this species before because of the famous Lucy fossil. Lucy is the most complete Australopithecus skeleton ever found. It consists of 40% of the original bones. Scientists believe that she died after falling out of a tree while trying to get a tasty meal. Unfortunately, predators had already eaten her by the time her body was discovered. Australopithecines were pretty smart, but they lacked one very important quality that helped our ancestors survive. Can you guess what that quality might be? If you thought it was the ability to use tools, you're absolutely right. Our distant ancestors learned this skill about 2.6 million years ago, but Australopithecines never mastered it. Despite their high intelligence, they couldn't develop complex language skills. Therefore, they couldn't share their knowledge or pass on instructions like, "Hey, watch out for predators," or "Don't eat this plant." They probably used simple gestures and sounds to communicate, kind of like primates do today. Another major difference between our ancestors and Australopithecines is that they walked upright on 2 legs instead of on all 4s. However, don't think that it was easy for them to adapt to this new way of moving. Scientists believe that even after our ancestors learned to walk upright, they still sometimes resorted to moving on all 4s. After all, it's much easier to move that way. But walking on 2 legs was extremely important for the development of the brain. The upright position freed up our hands and allowed our brains to grow. But even with all these advantages, the first humans still had to go through a lot. For example, they had to deal with the climate change caused by global cooling. In addition, people had to compete for food with other animals and fight off predators. Meanwhile, they had to flee from a less evolved species. Imagine our ancestors' surprise when they first saw these creatures. According to experts, these beings looked like a hybrid of a human and a gorilla. They had a gorilla-like wide chest and shoulders, but their arms were much longer. These guys could easily reach a height of up to 6 feet and 8 inches and weighed over 400 pounds. They also had an extremely strong bite force, which was comparable to that of a hyena. Despite their size, they were much less smart than humans and didn't know how to make tools. They probably spent most of their time looking for food and barely had time to do anything else. So, why did the first humans have to flee from these creatures? The answer is simple. They were too big and too strong. Of course, our ancestors knew how to fight, but they couldn't win a battle against such opponents. Humans could only hope to dodge the blows of these giants and run away. Fighting was pointless, so the only option was to flee. Fortunately, our ancestors were faster and more agile. They could easily outrun these creatures and save themselves. Over time, people began to realize that these giants weren't a match for them. Perhaps that's why the remains of these creatures were found next to human settlements. Do you think they could have formed an alliance with humans? Share your thoughts below. Thanks for watching. Don't forget to subscribe and leave a like. See you soon. Bye.